So the only time I thought I would be making a part 2 to the whole wild trigger concept was if Bushy made it into a real part of the game. And it would be a celebratory post with "We did it" in all caps, and 5 to 7 exclamation points depending on how I woke up that morning. However, after playing with the idea with some friends on a week that there wasn't a tournament, I got some practical experience with the wild trigger and thought it would be a good idea to share those experiences. So I'll start with the one thing that definitely could be better about the wild trigger. I thought about it while editing the video, and I saw some comments about it too, but I didn't want to re-record the whole thing and just left it as it is. But there is a much better name for the trigger, which is the will trigger. It makes even more sense for marketing purposes, especially since we are in will dress right now, and the trigger would replace the over trigger, which was introduced in overdress, and it still fits the idea of the trigger since it's whatever you will it to be. I'm not gonna lie, that was a flop on my end, but I do definitely think that the will trigger is a way better name moving forward. So that's what I'll try to call it from now on, but if anyone calls it the wild trigger, I will still definitely understand what they mean. Next, I'll move on to some of the positives. As I thought when theorizing the trigger, it is really helpful to be able to choose what trigger it is. Having 8 cards in deck that could be a draw and damage or a critical and drive just made it feel so much easier to be comfortable in whatever I drive checked. On top of that, being able to completely tailor the trigger to the current needs was so awesome. There was one time that one of my friends chose to make the defensive will trigger check a draw, and then regretted the choice by saying they should have made it a front in order to help guard their rear guards. There was also another fight in which they had trouble finding their Magnolia Elder, but they checked the will trigger a few times and decided to make them draws in order to help reach their Elder, or even just to get some more pieces to make their current turns a bit better. I pretty much just use it as a draw and damage and a critical and drive, but I was playing Phantom Blaster Overlord too, so I didn't have many other needs than that. But being able to choose between that for us was really awesome, since we could choose whatever option would let us play the game best. Another benefit that I didn't really expect was just how comforting it was to guard again. There was one time I was guarding my friend's grade 4 Vanguard with the will trigger, and I consciously thought to myself that it was a 3 to pass or an over trigger. But then I caught myself and remembered that with the will triggers, there was no over trigger. And I all of a sudden felt a lot more relaxed playing the game, and even felt a bit more confident in my guards. Since we've all been playing with the over trigger for so long, even though I've played without it for longer, kinda forgot the feeling of when you hard guard something and there isn't just a card in deck that can bypass all of it. I kinda forgot what it was like for a 3 to pass to really be a 3 to pass. It was nice. The last benefit I'm going to talk about will be in relation to the guard power of the will trigger. This worked out exactly as I hoped it would. Fighting against Bruce, even though he got to do his skills and be powerful, I didn't need to have 2 to 3 perfect guards in hand to stop the turn, since the will trigger would be able to make a 23k swing a 2 to pass. Or even if they got the order and everything else off too, just a little extra shield to make the same guard. It really made living those turns a lot more possible. Even with a smaller hand, I didn't feel like seeing Unrivaled Bruce hit the field meant the end of the game unless I hit like 3 defensives. It let me have more time aside from my first 3 turns to finish them off, since it let the game go on a bit longer. Although that's also where the first negative comes in, since letting the game go on longer also means being at grade 4 longer. Although I only really fought Magnolia and Bruce, I could definitely tell that letting decks with way higher aggro ceilings and triple drive also use the will triggers can make it really tough for a deck without as strong of a turn 4 pop-off to win, since the grade 4 decks get to benefit from the shield value of the will trigger as well. Which would mean another turn each game against Esper Aridia, another turn with Bastion Prime, another turn with Unrivaled Bruce, and so on and so forth. Let me run you through a quick simulation on just how tough it could be to have to last on multiple of those later grade 4 turns. We'll use Bastion Prime for our example. So say you get to have your whole deck in hand, but you're at 5 damage, and we can just assume those are token damages just for the sake of everything. And all you have to do is guard 3 full-on Bastion Prime turns with your entire deck in hand. But Bastion Prime will get no chance for triggers, Not with a Grail, not on the triple drive, nothing. Sounds pretty easy to do, but all those cards in hand can go away pretty fast. So with the Will Trigger, you would have around 260k guard, a bit more if you played with fronts, but this is just for the draw trigger set. And the first turn would have a swing with Alden and Sparade in the same columns, letting them be 38k on the first swing and 63k on the second swing. That would be 30k shield for the first two rearguard swings, 20k for the vanguard swing, and then 55k for the last two rearguard swings. But for the first two turns, you would definitely save your perfect guards for those two big swings. Then it would be a total of 80k shield for the other three attacks per turn. So that would be 160,000 shield and all of your PGs for the first two Bastion Prime turns. And that would be another 80k for the first three swings on the next turn. So that's 240,000 spent. And then you need another 110,000 shield for the last two swings. And since you'd only have 20k left in shield value from triggers, we would need to count how many normal units you'd have to guard with. So if we have 50 cards, minus 4 from the ride deck that can't go to hand unless special skills, minus 7 that would likely be grade 4s or grade 3s for Persona ride or orders, although a lot of decks tend to have more, just that for the sake of a small average. Then minus the 16 triggers, minus the 4 PGs, that would leave 19 cards in deck that could have shield value. Since all the grade 1s and 2s have 5k shield, that would be 95k guard, and with the 20k you have left from triggers, that would be 115,000 guard, which is only 5k over what you would need to block the remaining two Alden swings. Now that simulation was with your entire available deck in hand, assuming maximum shield value for normal units, although you could have a bit more with fronts to make up for some, and no trigger potential at all for Bastion Prime. If it is this close with that much handicap, I think it would be a lot to expect someone to do if they had to deal with it while not having their entire deck in hand, even if they get to take some of those swings as damage. Which is why I think letting the grade 4 decks also benefit from the Will Trigger would let the game push a bit more in their favor. But I don't think that really has to be how it is. We already see the direction that Bushiroad is trying to take the game by making the grade 3s better to play, with cards like Nirvana Java coming out with the crossover dress ability, and Sylvan Hornbeast Serral helping with grade 3 Magnolia. And that deck is also still allowed to run Inlet Pulse, which is pretty cool, since the choice restriction is only with the grade 4 Magnolia. But another major showing of this is with the Perfect Guard order coming in the Leonorn, Dredule, and Youthberg trial decks that can only be used if your Vanguard is grade 3 or less, and is free if your opponent's Vanguard has triple drive. Not to mention, it is really useful since it gets around guard restrict since it's an order and doesn't hit the Guardian Circle. I think that the Will Trigger can follow the same trend and also really help reduce the use of the grade 4 decks. I think what would be best is if the Will Trigger, at least when it's released, is choice restricted not only with the Over Trigger, but also with grade 4s in the main deck. This would mean that decks with huge late game pop-offs won't be able to keep the game going into later turns themselves when they have more of the advantage, and would also let grade 3 focused decks have a chance to stay in the game during those turns, while also not getting punished for not having insane turn 4s and 5s. Now, this would mean that grade 4 decks would still be running the Over Trigger, but I think that can be okay, since the Will Trigger can really help to win those 9 out of 10 games that the Over Trigger doesn't impact the game. It can make a lot more decks viable past turn 4 in the current format. But that's really all of what I thought about the Will Trigger, aside from some of the other obvious advantages that I mentioned in the last video on the topic. I just wanted to share my opinion now that I have more experience on their use, and just give an update on how I think they could be even better implemented into the game. Do you think this might be a bit too harsh for the grade 4 decks? Do you also think this would really help Will Triggers to make the format even healthier? Feel free to let me know in the comments below, and thanks for watching.